What do you do when the floor is dirt, there's not enough chairs to go around, and you just need something that'll do the job? Or let's say you want to go up on a hill and want something that's not going to wobble when you put it down. What do you grab when you're working, carving, milking, mending, and you need to get close to the job? And why is the answer so often the three-legged stool? Today on the first episode of Haro Crafted, we're going to be building a tripod made of red cedar. Simple, light, and stable, and most importantly, the only thing I had on hand. And while we build this humble stool, we're going to find out what exactly gave it its reputation. Now let's start with picking the cleanest piece of wood we have for the seat. Cedar is notoriously full of knots and has horrible grain, which doesn't help, but as the old saying goes, work with what you got. Just avoid knots as much as possible. Cut a seat blank and try to keep it thick if you're using something like cedar, a soft hardwood, because the thickness is going to be your insurance policy. If you have a more robust wood like oak, maple, walnut, you can get away with using a thinner seat. You're going to want to flatten both sides of the seat so it sits true. And at this stage, I'd recommend carving to make it more comfortable if that's what you're looking for. But you can always do that later, and it isn't always needed, as this just needs to be functional. You're also going to want to either sand or chamfer that top edge so it doesn't feel like you're sitting on a plank. Try to remember, if you have a thin seat and put the holes too close to the edge, it's going to split sometime in its life, whether that's now or 400 years down the road. It's going to split. And for this stool, its technology is all behind the geometry. And your seat is that hub that holds on to it. And for mine, since it's so thick, I wanted to go ahead and chamfer the bottom edge to take some of that load off, make it lighter, and make it a little more visually appealing. I made sure to keep it thick around the middle where I'm going to put the holes to ensure that rigidity. So let's start off as early as we can. Before anybody's making thrones, we're sitting on rocks, we're sitting on stumps, we're sitting on anything we could sit on. With that being said, that's not the most comfortable thing in the world. But when we get to the Neolithic period, we start seeing purpose-made seating. At Scarabring and Orkney, we start seeing these purpose-built furniture, where we start seeing built-in stools and benches in these stone houses. And then we get to a civilization that loved the stool, ancient Egypt. In Egypt, stools ranged across all classes, with the most common kind being a curved seat with two front legs and one back. There's two images where we see different workers sitting on tripods, whether they're making jewelry or doing some craftsmanship like woodwork. This is also where we start seeing why the three-leg situation worked out so well. Many Egyptian homes had dirt floors, which are going to be uneven, they're going to be bumpy, they're going to have dings and hits and high spots, low spots, and four-legged seats are never going to sit flat. But when you have 3 points that define a plane, all 3 feet of the stool are always going to hit the floor. So no matter which way the floor is heading, you're always going to be stable. And this makes sense why so many things we see now still use tripods, cameras, telescopes, easels, even my archery stand is a tripod. So going back to the build, you're going to want to split 3 legs from any kind of straight grain you have, preferably with a froe or an axe. Now, I didn't have that option. My wood was really knotty, the grain was moving all over. And so I just had to saw down the middle. I was able to saw 2 pieces and cut each of those pieces in half, which gave me 4 blanks to work from, each about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. You can then typically shave and taper these down, leaving it real thick at the top and thin at the bottom so that it looks a little better and it isn't so hefty. Now with cedar, considering it's not going to be the hardest wood we have, I decided to leave a little thick and just octagonalize it to give it a little bit of character. Now keep in mind, you can chamfer the legs later. It is not necessary right now. And the most important thing to keep in mind is that you can take wood off, but you're not going to be able to put it back on if you go a little too far. So if you're not feeling confident yet, wait until the end. We can do it once we glue everything in. Now, something interesting about riven wood, or wood that you cut with a knife or a Drawknife, is it's always going to be a little more sturdy than if you cut it straight down the grain. What riving wood does is it splits it along the grain, which makes it a lot more rigid, which a current machine-made piece of furniture just is not going to do. When you cut along the grain and cut through the grain, you uncover weak spots where it might split, it might break, crack, and when you rive it, it ensures that it's not going to do that. Now, once you start seeing the tripod, you can see it everywhere throughout history because it solves a lot of very complicated problems in a very simple way. You can make it with hand tools. It doesn't take a lot of material, and it solves an uneven floor problem. Even in the ancient Mediterranean, backless stools were everyday seating for people of modest rank. Now, while the higher class got cushioned seats, full chairs, back support, the modest rank still had stools. And even Rome, with its obsession of status, still had high regards for a tripod. Tripod coming from the Greek meaning of having 3 legs. A specific tripod, the Delphi tripod, was used as a symbol of status or a symbol of power, which was a 3-legged piece of furniture used for offerings or ritualistic purposes. And then we shift east and the story continues. In China, the stool was used as a form of raised seating. Nomadic Central Asian groups would introduce camp stool to China by the 2nd century CE, literally a design traveling through the world. And if we jump forward to the Viking Age, we see the stool show up in Northern Europe in a form that looks oddly familiar. Finds from Viking sites like York and Lund include small D-shaped stools. These D-shaped stools had the 2 front legs and 1 in the rear. An entirely different world, same creation. On farms, it becomes a classic milking stool, deliberately 3-legged and open so the milker could lean forward and do their job. So here's the shift. Stools spread not because they're invented by people over time, but because physics keeps reinventing it where the problems occur. Now it's time to mark the seat. And personally, I did this mostly by eye because at the end of the day, you do not need to be perfectly precise to have a functioning product. I first start by splitting the circle into 4 equal sections. I then add 2 diagonal lines on the bottom to create a sort of peace symbol. And once we have this peace symbol, we can mark the top line and the 2 diagonal lines 3 inches in from each side to ensure a secure and enabled joint when we put it in. Now you're going to bore each mortise with a drill and bit if you want to stay traditional. And I bored mine with the splay out a little too far. I did it around 120 degrees, and I think it's just splayed a little too much. I think if you lessened it about 15 degrees to 105, 110 degrees, I think it should be good. It'll be a little taller and it'll not go as wide. That being said, the stool turned out fine, and do what you want. A simple way to keep the splay in mind is to get a scrap piece of wood and mark the angle on it. Cut that angle out, and every time you bore that new mortise, keep that piece of wood over it so that you can keep an eye on which way it's going. Now, splaying the legs is necessary. Do not create a stool with straight legs. One is going to keep you stable, the other one is going to flip you over as soon as you make any little movement. Now, a stool seems a little too humble for law, but the rules on who would sit in these stools would be deadly serious. In the Renaissance and early modern Europe, a chair with a back was often a privilege of rank. In French court culture, a small stool, or a tabouret, wasn't just furniture. It was recognized privilege. Certain women were entitled to sit on this low stool in the king's presence, but not a chair. And in this period, the height difference signified your status. And then there's the institutional side, churches. In Scotland's Presbyterian culture, the stool of repentance, or the cuddy stool, placed sinners on display, or an elevated seat of public shame, where the stool becomes a tool of discipline and not comfort. Which brings us to one of those moments where the stool comes into the spotlight in history in the legend of Jenny Geddes. In 1637, during a controversial service at St. Giles Cathedral, she protests, and according to which version you hear, says something along the lines of, Deo colig the wham of ye, false thief. Or in other terms, devil give you colic, false thief. And then hurls her stool at the dean's head. Now the exact history is debated, but the story is sticky for a reason. And to prove the stool as weapon kind of ideology during the time, Shakespeare gives us Catherine in The Taming of the Shrew, where she states, comb your novel with a 3-legged stool. So good news, stools are very easy to make. Bad news, they make excellent projectiles. Now as we continue, we're going to want to shape a round tenon to match the hull. I used about 1 inch boring bit, so I'm going to need to make a 1 inch tenon. And this can be done by making a curve around the line wherever you want it to end. I went about 3 inches down to make sure that there was enough room sticking out the top since my seat was so thick. And then you're going to want to take a chisel and remove the waste from the top. Now if you have straight grain, this is very easy. It comes straight off. It shouldn't be a problem. If you don't have straight grain, this is going to be difficult and you might need to introduce some other objects, a rasp, a knife, something to take care of it a little easier. And from there, you're going to want to shape out the shoulder of the tenon. You're not going to want a flat, square shoulder, or else over time, that is going to wedge the tenon out of place. And if you round the shoulder, as time continues, the more you sit on it, the farther the tenon is going to go inside the mortise, creating a tighter, more secure joint. And you can round the shoulder with a bunch of different tools. You can use a Drawknife, a chisel, a rasp, sandpaper, or you can go along the route I did and just use a knife, carve it out. And then we're going to test fit it with just hand pressure. It should be able to be in there, but sit tight when you pick it up. If it's too loose and it falls out, your tenon is just too small. It might be better to just remake it. And once the tenon is fit in place and everything's secure, you're going to want to mark on your seat and on the tenon which way you want it to orient. And from here, we're going to saw a curve right down the tenon. And you're going to want to orient this curve while you're marking to make sure it is horizontal with the grain. If you make it perpendicular with the grain, it is going to split the grain, and you're going to end up with a broken seat and a very sad time. Make sure you mark it horizontal. That way, when you put it back in, when we're ready to glue, it'll be ready to go. You're going to want your wedge to be about 1/16 of an inch at the top and work it down to a feather edge. For this build, I'm going to go with a piece of oak scrap I have for the wedge. It's going to give it a little bit of rigidity since it's a little bit of a more dense hardwood. And when you're cutting this wedge, go a little slower than you think you're going to do. It would be way worse to cut it all the way down just for it to break at the last second than if you just took a little bit more time. Now keep in mind, this wedge is the mechanical lock that is going to keep it in place, because traditionally this was not done with glue. You'd wedge it in, it'd be done. The wedge is going to keep it in place over time, so make sure this part is done correctly. Now historically, we can see stools in a lot of different examples. In a 1669 Massachusetts probate, the inventory lists tables, stools, chairs, chests, and wooden wares. Now it's not poetry, but it shows that it was important enough to need to be listed. In England, an abbot's account of the Abingdon Alley itemizes the gardener's tools, and that includes one 3-legged stool and one hurdle, which is just another piece of shop equipment during the time. But workshops are where stools thrive. In Egypt, we see all these different representations of stools being used, showing us how far back these stools really went. In the 19th and 20th century, we still see these stools being used. We see lab stools, we see drafting stools, we even see piano stools. All of this coming from the same root, that it creates a workable area around us while still being stable on uneven surfaces. And even taverns, any establishment benefits from having a piece of furniture that you can move, stack, and replace really easily. Stools are kind of like the flexible seating of history. They're kind of like the foldable chairs that you take out during the holidays when there's way more people in your home than you like there to be. We see the stools show up as a character in a fairy tale in Joseph Jacobs' English Fairy Tales in 1890, Titty Mouse and Tatty Mouse. A 3-legged stool literally says, "And why do you weep?" And it ends up collapsing the whole building, crazy turn of events. Read it at your own discretion. And now, why does a stool feel so steady when it looks like it probably shouldn't? And that's because 3 points are always going to define a plane. A 4-legged chair is only going to sit flat or stable on a floor that's level, and if all the legs are exactly the same length. A 3-legged stool can be imperfect, but still be steady. And the joinery matters too. The stake joint creates a joint that is going to tighten over time. It's going to create that robustness that 4-legged chairs don't always have. So over time, as you continue to sit and you do work and you do things on this stool, the joints are only going to get tighter. And across the world, you're going to see all these different examples of stools all across the different cultures. Some favoring woven seat designs, some favoring taller, shorter, some religious, some culturalistic, but it all comes back to the point. It's easy, you can use hand tools, and it comes with reliable features that are usable anywhere in any situation. And now it's time to drive home the legs from the underside. You're going to cover the shoulders with glue around the joint and hammer it into the mortise as soon as you get those lines correct that you marked before. Once those are hammered in place, you're going to get the wedge, put glue on both sides, and hammer it in slowly. If you do it too fast, the wedge risks breaking. So you're going to want to do it slow and steady, and don't hammer it to the point that it breaks. I then like to line the perimeter of the tenon with glue just to ensure safety. After we let it dry, for about 30 minutes or so, we can cut it flat, and from there you can sand it, plane it, scrape it, get it flat on top, make it smooth. And now, if you didn't before, feel free to chamfer those legs. If it's not level, if it's so disproportionately off, cut the legs level, and then it's time to finish. Now for this finish, I'm going traditional, I'm going old. I'm going to use some boiled linseed oil, cover the whole thing, let it soak for about 30 minutes, After 30 minutes, you're going to want to wipe the excess. You don't want it to be tacky, because if you leave all that oil on there, it's going to be tacky. Now I went for the extra step of preserving it. I put on a little bit of paste wax, which I apply with steel wool, and then I'll buff it with either a buffing cloth, a t-shirt, and at the end here, remember to keep it simple. This channel is about doing things traditionally, and traditionally, things weren't perfect. They don't have to be perfect. A lot of the time, in furniture, the beauty I see is the imperfections. The sheer fact that this was handmade is mind-blowing, and it really gives you that sense of accomplishment. And so let's go back to current times. In the 1800s, this stool even became a part of fashion. The thieves' stool, designed in 1884 by Leonard Wyburd for Liberty and Company, it is a direct revival of the ancient Egyptian stool. And in the 20th century, modernism turned the tripod into an icon. Alvar Aalto introduced the Stool 60, 3 legs, a simple round seat designed for practicality and efficiency, and crucially, stackability. So now the moment of truth. On uneven ground, I'm going to set this stool down on gravel, on stones, on grass, so no matter what, it plants its feet and it sits steady. And after checking the load, and I sit on it, and I feel comfortable that I'm not going to break it into a million pieces, and it's not going to cause me to have a horribly embarrassing moment, I stand on it, and it's still good. What is really the most surprising part about all of this? How simplicity and efficiency can lead to centuries worth of history around a single piece of furniture. It's a tool and piece of furniture you can pick up with one hand and throw if you want. So if you enjoyed watching this video, please feel free to like, subscribe, comment down below, let me know what else you'd like to see, and stick around as we continue crafting the objects that shaped history.